Okay, greetings everyone. My name is Sarah Barnes, and on behalf of Campbell & Company, I'd like to welcome you to Communicating Your Campaign Case. Today we are live from our Chicago office. We hope you guys are all having a great day. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly review some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. So first, to ensure that you have the best experience possible, and okay, thanks Sandy. You can close any programs other than GoToWebinar, of course, that might be running on your computer. Call in using a cell phone instead of using your computer speakers. Move your cell phone away from your computer. And if you experience any visual issues, you can send a chat to Rebecca rather than Campbell & Company. You may also contact GoToWebinar at 1-800-263-6317. Finally, today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you'll earn 1 continuing education credit, and is good for your participation with CFRE International. About an hour after the webinar, you will receive an email from GoToWebinars that includes a web address to download your certificate, the PDF of the presentation, as well as information on how to register for any of our upcoming webinars. We do welcome questions throughout the webinar, so if you have any questions, please feel free to send it to me, to Sarah Barnes, and I will ask them throughout. You can also send it to Rebecca at Campbell & Company, and she will make sure to forward them to me. And now I'd like to turn it over to Andy Brommel and Patrick Chestnut, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Andy Brommel, and Pat and I are really excited to be able to share this webinar and these ideas with you here today. For those of you who've been riding with us since the beginning of the school year, this is the last in our 4-part series of fundraising communications webinars that we've been doing over the last year. We do these every year, and you know, with updates and variations and new examples and so forth. So what we try to do in this series of webinars is really cover a range of different topics that kind of collectively add up to a core curriculum around fundraising communications. So we have kind of a 101, 201, 301 sequence that we did between October and April that covers the basics of case for support, how to do messaging for a donor audience, and then how to develop specific fundraising materials that are really helpful. Today's session is more of a special topics kind of thing. We're really looking at campaign casework. Everything else we've done earlier this year with the other webinars is kind of general purpose. Could be for a campaign, could be for your, your annual fund, could be for anything. Today we really want to talk about campaigns and what makes casework go in a campaign setting. So just by way of a little bit of introduction, I'll be sort of speaking from the collective experience of our communications team here at Campbell & Company, or at least I'll be trying to do that. We have a team of 9 communications professionals here within our firm that really, this is really the kind of our bread and butter of what we do, is a lot of campaign case development. We do this kind of work with a wide range of organizations, campaigns large and small, campaigns, focused and broad, lots of different approaches to campaign case development. So a lot of the examples that we'll share here are sort of drawn from or composited from client work that we've done, and this is really one of our favorite topics to talk about, and so I'm really excited to share some of that experience with you, and I'm really excited in particular to be joined by Pat Chestnut here. As those of you who've been on our previous webinars know, I've done the other ones solo and probably had enough of my dumb jokes and things that I say to amuse myself, so here that will be reduced to 50% because we have Pat in the booth as well.
Hey everybody, I'm happy to be here, and hopefully I'll add some new sense of humor to the conversation.
Let's hope. All right, so let's just jump right in with a quick recap. For those of you who have joined our previous webinars, this will be a refresher. For those of you who didn't, it'll help you make sure you don't feel like you're missing anything. In the 101 session, we really talk about that foundational level of basically what is the case for support and what does it need to do. And we really view case development as basically a process of answering questions. We go through just a quick outline of questions that you really need to answer in order to understand or to have a clear case for support. It's not so much about writing a case statement, and it's really about having good, strong answers to these questions. who is our donor, what motivates our donor, what do we want our donor to feel, and sort of what are we offering our donor? What are we asking them to support? Why does it matter? Why is it urgent? What does our donor need to know about that project or our organization? What are the benefits that we're going to deliver? And what is the philanthropic investment that is needed, which kind of includes the question of why is philanthropy important to, to this vision? So what we're really trying to do in answering these questions is just make sure that we really have good, strong, logical foundation and basis and direction for our donor communications. We know who our audience is, and we know what we're bringing to them as a giving opportunity. So that's what 101 is all about. The 201 session is really about how do we take that sort of foundational logic of the case and start to turn it into messages that are, very intentional bits of language and messaging that go out there and engage our donors. So a message is a simple expression of a compelling idea. It's intended to start conversations, and the way that you write, the way you express yourself can convey that strength and authority, even the charisma of your mission, if you're getting your messaging right. Messages are independent of format. They can be communicated in print, in video, in conversation, in presentation, but 201 session is really all about how we develop those clear, simple messages. So, for instance, you might work toward simple messages like, Alzheimer's disease is the defining public health challenge of our time, or the endowment is the most important investment we can make in our school's future. These are simple messages that clarify what you're trying to say and give your donor kind of an entry point that, that you can build out from. So how do we create messages? We talk a lot about boiling things down to the essence, making sure you're taking a stand on something, saying something that sort of puts you out there a little bit, starting with strong statements and dialing it back if you have to, trying to find the boldest thing that you can credibly claim. Teach people something. Look for things that sound good when you read them out loud, and limit yourself to just a few words, and beware of all the things that kill good messaging, such as jargon and overly clarifying things, trying to be overly comprehensive, being too metaphorical. So the 201 session is really a lot about writing and about how you can express things in a compelling way. 301 session we'll just touch on briefly. This is really more about materials. So we're looking at, how do you actually produce materials that help you walk into donor meetings with confidence, whether you're equipped with the right kinds of, print materials and collateral, or a presentation, or leave behind, all these sort of specific, tangible supports to good fundraising. So we think about that in terms of what do you need before, during, and after a donor conversation? What are you sending ahead? What are you using during the conversation? What are you leaving behind? When we look at materials, we're thinking about how does content want to be communicated, thinking beyond just writing a bunch of copy. How do you use sidebars, stories, quotes, infographics, visuals, photography, design? How do you use the full range to communicate what you're trying to communicate? And what are different formats good for? What's video good for? What's a PowerPoint presentation good for? What kind of print materials are useful? We talk about some of the things you can do with interactive and iPad app presentations. So that's what we covered in 301. And the reason I wanted to recap all of this just quickly is that all of this stuff is directly relevant to what we're doing in today's session, communicating your campaign case. And in a way, it's really about taking some of these same ideas and applying them in a really campaign-specific way. So if you haven't reviewed those webinars, you might want to go check them out. They're all archived on our website. And but without further ado, let's just jump right into kind of what we're about today, which is really focusing on everything that makes campaign casework unique. So we want to start with this question of what is it that really makes the challenge of case development different than sort of general purpose, general audience, annual fund, campaign case or case development. And this is where we're really drawing on the experience of our work, because this is really, like I said, this is really what we do most frequently day to day. A few key points to get us started. Campaign casework is different because you have several key advantages and then some challenges. First of all, the projects, this is a big advantage. The projects are exciting and big. You know, campaigns are opportunities to do stuff that's actually really exciting. It's above and beyond your sort of business as usual operations. They're projects that have power to inspire people. So from a communication standpoint, that's a great place to be starting from. There's usually a sense of moment around a campaign, or at least there can be and there should be. You know, a sense that we are at a really significant moment in our mission or in our community or in, you know, there's a sense of moment that you can create that from a communication standpoint is powerful. And you have a chance to do something that lasts. You know, there's generally with the kind of communications you can do around a campaign, you can reach higher. You can make bigger claims. You can be a little more, you can push the envelope a little more. And a lot of times we see campaign communications that actually kind of move a whole institution forward in terms of how it communicates. You know, it can be a next and it can actually lead to a better and a more exciting way of talking about your work on the day-to-day level. So, and we see so many examples of situations where, you know, an organization will develop a brand for a campaign, and then that will end up becoming the institutional brand or informing the organizational brand after the campaign. So these are these big projects that kind of push you forward and can force you into sort of doing better at communicating your mission. But they come with some really significant challenges as well. First of all, and this is all the fundraisers in the room will know this, it's challenging to inspire above and beyond giving. You're asking people to take whatever they're doing, you know, giving annually and, you know, probably double it for a period of 5 years, or, you know, or go to some larger multiple of that, make a gift above and beyond that. So if you're going to ask someone to do that, you really have to have a good reason for it. And the donors expect that. They expect a powerful case. You're going beyond that level of, you know, I'm investing in you because your mission is good, your organization is strong, we have a good relationship. Like that gets you, you know, a certain distance. Campaign typically requires you to go to a much more powerful expression of your case, and in particular a more substantive expression of your case. You're really putting, what you're putting in front of someone is essentially an investment proposal, you know, on the $25,000 or $100,000 or, you know, $5,000, whatever the level is. You're out of just sort of like general we're a good cause mode, and you're into I have an investment proposition for you that we want you to really dig into. So when we'll talk a lot about that. Campaigns tend to be very driven by volunteers. So everything you're doing has to work in their words, in their hands. They have to be able to take this message, that case, and go out and advance it themselves. So that's obviously an added challenge. And related to that challenge is that just about everything happens by committee in a campaign. You know, you've got a campaign committee, things are being reported to the board, all eyes are on the campaign often. You know, things get reviewed by staff, things get reviewed by the committee, by the board. So you have this challenge of trying to basically create something really powerful and distilled and distinctive and memorable, and then carry it through this gauntlet in which, you know, dozens of people are putting their hands on it, and you need it to come out the other side still strong and powerful, and hopefully stronger for all that input. So, you know, and that committee process, all of that can strengthen your work, or it can water it down. So it's one of those challenges.
Now, that's kind of the challenges as we see them from our perspective, but we often see them reflected through donors and through what they say to us in campaign studies. Andy and I get to work with a lot of our clients as Campbell & Company runs campaign studies to really help them develop preview documents, and then we have the fun and at times slightly compromised position as writers of being able to see directly the feedback donors provide in interviews. And there are a couple things that come up pretty frequently. So many times we hear donors say, these seem like really good projects, but what's the vision? What's this all about? Now, this is speaking to that need to inspire above and beyond giving, and it also reflects just where you are in the campaign plan at that point, but it's something that's important to continue developing. We often then see the opposite. It sounds like a good vision, but really I need to see the details before I make an investment. sometimes we actually see both of these in the same study, which is an interesting challenge, but one that you can deal with. Oftentimes, donors will want to know what's really different after the campaign. What makes this special? Why are we launching this special fundraising initiative right now? They might just say, I'll continue giving at my annual level. That's a sign that nothing's really grabbing them or inspiring them. And sometimes they just say, I didn't read it, which might mean they're busy. It might also mean that there was nothing in there that made them want to read it. And so what you see here, there is a need to inspire, to excite, and engage people. But like Andy was saying, a lot of these are asking for substance. It's not just for a clever message or tagline. They're asking you to advance the ideas as you further develop your case. And so we're going to talk a lot about strategies, about the structure of the case. But if there's one thing to keep in mind as we go throughout, it's the need to use what we call compelling clarity. It needs to be compelling in your case for support. It needs to be powerful to excite people, to engage them, and ultimately to inspire them. But as you do that, you want to clarify your ideas, have a clear vision, clear plans, and a clear direction for your organization. So just keep that in mind in the background as we talk about the case at different levels and different expressions. You want to always communicate with a sense of compelling clarity.
That's kind of a theme we're going to return to, and it starts. I tend to think that our clients struggle the most, or we see organizations struggle the most with being really clear about what their campaigns are going to achieve, what the priorities are, what the vision is. And so much of the work, it's easy to fixate on the sort of the writing side of it, and what's our campaign tagline and name and so forth. And we love that. We're writers. That's what we do. But we can't really do that work until the bones of the case are strong, and that's why we want to start. We're actually going to spend a decent amount of time here on what we call campaign architecture, or the architecture of the campaign case. And we use that term because it is a little bit like building a house. I mean, you can't really build a beautiful house without without having that internal framing being really strong and wisely planned and well executed. And we as writers and as people who do creative communications work for campaigns, we can't come in and dress up a plan that's not clear or well structured or well thought out. It's like trying to frost a cake that's still hot from the oven, and it's just kind of a melty, smushy mess. You need to have that strong architecture. So and in particular, we're going to start talking about levels and thinking about how campaign cases need to be strong at every level. So what do we mean by levels? We tend to think about these things in terms of 3 levels. Kind of the top level, the big idea, the vision, sort of that one big idea that holds everything together. At the bottom level, you have your projects. What are we actually putting money toward in this campaign? Capital projects, endowment projects, scholarships, whatever it may be, the actual stuff. And then in the middle, you have this layer, sort of the middle level it's actually optional. We'll show you some examples where we don't have that, but there's often a middle level where you're kind of organizing the projects or grouping them into buckets as a way of kind of avoiding having, a laundry list of 10 projects. You'd like to group them and have it be feel a little more manageable. So these are the 3 levels that we like to focus on. And if there's one thing you take away from this session, we want you to really have that commitment to building your case to be strong and substantial and have that compelling clarity at each of these levels. So a quick example of how this works in practice. We work with a lot of independent schools. They're wonderful clients, really interesting communities. They always pose interesting case challenges and opportunities. So here's an example of a school. This in particular was a school in an inner city school that was privately run as a nonprofit. They've been tremendously successful, and they've got proof of concept. Like, their model of education works, and it's very, very needed in the community that they work in. The problem is they're full. They got a huge waiting list. I mean, families, it's either the best day of their life when they get into this school, or it's heartbreaking when they can't. So their big picture vision is we need to serve more students. The model works, we need to take it up to scale. So that's the vision. On the strategic level, the first thing they need to do strategically is they need to build their facilities, they need more space. So that means, new middle school wing, new science labs, new gymnasium. The next strategy is the faculty. They need more faculty to serve more students. So they need to invest in professional development. They need to strengthen their compensation to attract more faculty of the same caliber that they currently have. And they need to invest in the students. Just about every student who goes to this school is on scholarship of some sort, so they need that scholarship funding. So this is just a really simple example of how the campaign case can have that compelling clarity at each level. If you want to talk about the projects are well defined. They are, and each one of these projects, the middle school wing, what we need to do around faculty compensation, there's real clarity there. They can show you, we need to increase our compensation by X percent to get to the 75th percentile within our, local market. And so there's compelling clarity within each of the projects, but there's also compelling clarity around the vision. The vision is clear: serve more students. The model works. There's so much more need, so many more deserving families. We need to go there. And at that middle level, it's clear too. What do we need to do to serve more students? Basically three things, three big strategies: facilities, faculty, and student support. So this is how that kind of three-level construct can just sort these things out in a really nice, easy way. Now, it doesn't always look like this. It can look very different depending on your campaign. In a university example, for a university campaign, 9-figure campaign, 10-figure campaign, you've got 1 million projects. There's never even really a complete list of all the projects in a university campaign. And they're organized, in this example, they're organized around the different schools: College of Arts and Sciences, College of Engineering, Nursing. And with a university campaign, what's the vision that can tie all of that stuff together? And there's, hundreds of projects. The vision is usually something extremely lofty because, you have to go to a really high level of aspiration and abstraction and, appeal in order to kind of extend an umbrella that goes over all of those dozens and dozens of projects. So university, same construct, but it just looks different. Simple campaign, you may not need that that strategy level. Say and a lot of school campaigns are this way. We have a vision of the school we want to become. There are 3 projects that we know we really need to do in the next 3 to 5 years in order to move us toward that. You don't need that middle level. You don't need buckets. I love when we have campaigns like this. It's nice and simple. You can just sort of focus on the vision and then connect the projects to it. And if you can do that successfully, you're doing your job. Every now and then we see the one project campaign, and these we really love because it's, I think it allows you to tell such a nice, clear, crisp story. We have one big vision, and like we were just working with a College of Engineering that they have a huge vision for what they want to be as a College of Engineering, but they really, in order to move toward that, it's all about building one new master sort of facility or building for them. Their building is old, it doesn't really support what they want to do. So it's a big vision, all encompassed in one project. It's a great, nice, tight campaign case to be able to tell. So any of these different scenarios might apply to you. All we're really trying to do is just show you how this construct with 3 levels, the versatility of it. And the point is, again, it needs to be strong at every level. But what's interesting is that, not every level is always equally important in every campaign.
And a lot of times what you'll see is when you're thinking about what level is most important, it's kind of really what are donors going to grasp onto? Or the way we think about it when we're trying to write these is where's the energy in this campaign? And that's something you tend to feel as you go about fleshing out the details and fleshing out the concepts. So here, you might have a vision-driven campaign. This is an example from an art school we worked with, where really the vision is all about enhancing what they do to attract the most creative people in the world to make their careers here in our city. It's something that will make a big difference in helping advance and revitalize the city, and they wanted to position their school as being at the center of that project and being something that civic leaders should invest in. Now what you see here, the investments themselves are actually all about students and faculty. It might be things like scholarships and travel grants. things that would make this art school more appealing to creative students from all over the place. But ultimately, from a donor perspective, this campaign's about bringing those people here to our city to advance our city, because creative people are at the core of revitalizing communities. You might also, though, have a project-driven campaign. We see this a lot of times with schools, for example, where it's a close, tight-knit community. They tend to have a lot of information about it, and you might have a vision of just simply continuing our tradition of excellence. It's something that people need to have to just kind of understand where we're going on the whole, what it's all about. But really, your parents, your alumni, they're probably going to get most jazzed about those particular projects, the new middle school wing. They might care most about helping better compensate and attract faculty. Oftentimes in schools, the real energy is at the project level, and that's what you want to emphasize in your case development. Now, this middle level of strategy is something we don't see as often, but it is something we've seen before. So to use another example here, we work with a society that's all about fighting a disease. And so their vision is really important, is ultimately talking about the donor motivation of leading the fight against this particular disease. But here the projects can get a little bit wonky. It might be about funding a study of one particular protein that may do such and such and help advance our understanding in this way. And donors care about that, but for their donors, it's really less, I'm about this one project. It's more, they sort themselves into how they want to engage with the organization. They might be a research person. I want to fund research, and yes, it does matter to me to know the types of research I'm funding, but ultimately research is where the energy lives for me. For another person, it might be about advancing the public fight or building general awareness of this disease and how it impacts families all throughout the nation. So it is something that a strategic level case can exist, but it's something we see a little bit less often than one that really focuses on the projects or the vision.
And the point is just, to really think about how within your campaign case, where is we need to be strong at every level, but where's the real emphasis? Are people going to engage with, the projects more? Are they going to want to get their hands on those projects and look at the diagrams and the blueprints and the cost projections? Or are they just going to kind of want to know that you've done that homework, but they really want to engage more around what is the big picture vision? I mean, we've had situations where, we'll go into a school setting and we'll work hard to put together this like big picture vision for what this campaign adds up to, and people will say, well, that's nice, but we don't need that Madison Avenue stuff, or we don't need that we don't need that slick messaging on top. What I really want to see is the detail, and it doesn't mean we're not going to have a vision. But it does somewhat tell us how we need to focus our work. And within our campaign case, what the sort of the balance of the content should be.
So what we want to talk about now is just how we go about developing the case at each level and what we really think is important. So when you think about the vision, whether it's a campaign that's really driven by the vision, or whether that vision is simply something there that provides an overall framework and rationale for the projects that are going to really bring it to life for donors, we think there are a couple things you want to try and do and that will really make it a good and effective vision. So first and foremost, you obviously want to make sure you convey the big idea. And this is kind of what we normally think of when we think of the concept of vision. This is our once-in-a-generation opportunity to create something our community truly needs. I know I worked with an organization that was really trying to build a public park, but for them it was about, this is our chance to fundamentally transform the face of our city, how people view us, and how we connect and live every day. So for them, it was really about this big, lofty idea. But the big idea can also be a story you tell in a slightly different way. It could be some of those simple examples from before, like, serve more students, lead the fight against this disease. It might be a story focused on a problem, something like there's this critical problem in society and we have to solve it, or more positively, we have a solution that works really well that we've proven, and we just need to bring it to scale. At the same time, then, we want to make sure, though, that the vision feels necessary. This is really how you get to that core question that donors always ask of, why a campaign? We want it to be something that people want to happen. So again, to use the example Andy used earlier of serving more students, that's so important for those families, for that community, and it's something that is going to compel people and make them see that this campaign is important and it merits a larger investment. Ultimately, we think it's important for the vision to kind of bring people together. We know that you're going to have a lot of stakeholders no matter what kind of organization you are, and they might engage with a different part of your organization and your mission a little more strongly than others. But we think there's a lot of value in really helping instill a common purpose that's going to bring them together as staff, as volunteers, as donors, and really help them connect to the future of your mission. And above all else, this is last but definitely not least, is the vision is just going to give you something to remember. It's kind of the one thing you need to know about this campaign. And I do think it's worth emphasizing that this is important not just from a donor perspective, but also for your staff and volunteers. It can really help empower them and kind of give them that refrain to fall back on in all their conversations. So, you can imagine a board member sitting down with a donor, and they might be talking about this building and what it's going to do, to go back to that College of Engineering example Andy had. And they might not remember all the details. They might say, yeah, it'll do this, and it's, it'll be really cool, but ultimately, it's about this vision. Ultimately, it's about serving more students. Ultimately, we want to attract more creative people to our city. It gives them that one key talking point they can always refer back to and really feel comfortable sharing with other people in their networks.
Vision level is super important. We spend a lot of time working at that level just to try to clarify and to find ideas, as Pat says, that have that sort of sticky quality to them. And and typically with the vision, what we're looking for when we're doing this work is we want to see somebody on the campaign committee or the campaign co-chair or whoever, we want to see them start taking these ideas and using them in their own language. And, when we're in a committee meeting and we're kicking our ideas around and we see someone take an idea and start to go with it, and they start adding on points to it, and they sort of tie it into their story, or they say, or they think of, meanings for it or applications of it that we haven't thought of. That's typically when we know that we're done on the vision level. And if there's kind of sitting back and they're still in what I call evaluation mode, where they're kind of saying, yeah, okay, that's good, but it's good at I'm not sure it does this or X, Y, or Z, or if it feels like they're sitting back and evaluating the vision, you're probably not across the finish line yet. But when you see them actually sort of taking it and using it or playing with it, then that's really more the relevant standard. So with the vision, you can almost measure it by your campaign committee. Always interesting conversations. You can spend a lot of time on it, and I think it's usually time well spent, but this can be actually the trickiest part. I want to talk a little bit about the middle level, which we've identified as strategy, but in conversation we mostly end up referring to this as kind of the buckets, the bucket level. How do the campaign projects group into buckets? And what we found is that there's no one right way to do this. In fact, there are several different kinds of buckets. This is, by the way, my favorite slide in this presentation. There are different ways that you can come up with those buckets that help you kind of organize the campaign into categories. So let's look at a few examples. There's kind of the practical approach or pragmatic approach. You just take your projects and group them. Okay, these are capital projects. These are programmatic investments. These are endowed investments. And you just group them kind of almost like logically or logistically in terms of what is the actual type of thing we're buying with this money. So that's a super practical approach, pretty versatile, works in a lot of cases. You can go in a more strategic direction where you say, okay, the buckets are around research, the different strategies. And this is kind of what we were showing in our disease society example. We have a research strategy, we have an advocacy strategy, we have an awareness building strategy. Now, every one of those might involve, some program funding, some endowment funding, they might involve some capital funding. They might involve different types of sort of practical investments, but they're organized around what the strategy is. So, that's another option. Or you can go in more of we see this sometimes, a conceptual direction. I've seen organizations really feel kind of drawn to this kind of conceptual buckets. You know, these are the projects that are all about innovation, and these are the projects that are all about continuing our excellence, and these are the projects that are all about kind of making sure that we're sustainable into the future. I think this can be very attractive because it makes you feel sophisticated. You know, it makes you feel like, oh, I'm really grouping these in a interesting, smart way. But I would add some caution to this. First of all, anytime you find yourself talking about conceptual buckets, you're probably, I don't know, it's just you might want to reevaluate your choices. It's just weird to be thinking about, you know, going this conceptual when you're trying to achieve clarity. The second question you need to ask yourself when you have this kind of a conceptual thing in the mix is, you know, does it really help people find their way to a project that they would like to support? You know, if the buckets are around capital and endowment, it's very easy to imagine a donor saying, you know, I'm really interested in the capital stuff, or I'm really interested in endowment. I'm a capital person. I'm a bricks and mortar person, or I'm not. Those are buckets, you know, those practical buckets that can help people sort themselves out and find a project for them. It's harder to see that around this sort of more conceptual approach that we see organizations taking. You may have some donors who say, you know, well, I'm really all about what this organization is doing in terms of innovation. You might have that, but I don't think it's as commonly the case. So what's really interesting is to think about within a single organization, how could you do these differently? So we're working with a museum, and they have 8 or 10 different projects that are all really cool projects in and of themselves. They've got a nice overall vision that's pretty clear, but we really had to think for a while about, okay, how are we actually going to organize these into categories? Because we can't just go out with this like 10 project laundry list, you know, and we need something to kind of group these things and help people find their way to the project that makes sense for them. So the super practical option, and this is what museums have been doing for generations, is, okay, we have your exhibit projects, you have your collections investments, you have projects around outreach and education, and then we've got our endowment. So very practical, very concrete. You know, this is, it feels like it's close to the stuff, you know, the stuff itself, the projects, the objects, the exhibits. It's very concrete. Then we thought about, well, okay, maybe that's a little bit uninspiring. What if we grouped it around kind of more of the strategies that we're pursuing? One big strategy is totally improving and sort of enhancing the visitor experience. Then we've got a whole strategy around going out into the community beyond our walls. And then we've got a whole strategy around building our foundation. So this cuts across the different categories in a different way. The visitor experience includes some exhibits, it includes some endowed stuff, it includes some collection stuff. You know, the strong foundation piece is largely endowment, but also includes some collections initiatives. The education and outreach piece ties into the exhibits, but also includes the outreach programs. So, you know, these cut across the different projects in a different way. And then we thought about, and this was suggested at one point, more of a conceptual approach. We've got projects that educate, projects that innovate, and projects that advance us as an institution. So these are all 3 different ways to slice and dice the same types of projects underneath the same vision. The question is, for you uniquely and in your organization, what makes sense? What feels like it actually helps people understand the campaign? Because to Pat's point earlier, this is all about compelling clarity too. What is the way of sort of bucketing these projects that helps people grasp and remember and picture in their head the campaign? So this is actually a really important level, even though it kind of, you know, it has that middle level thing where it's not quite as satisfying, but it's really important.
And I would just add to that too, that when you think about what these are doing in terms of telling your campaign story, they do, like Andy said, help donors kind of see how the projects fit together, see where they want to engage with the campaign. But even in a vision-driven campaign, they can really help put a little bit more meat on the bones of that. You can help, yeah. They help make that story more clear. I think we often find, you know, when you reflect on yourself, on how you react to things, it's a lot of times that vision doesn't make sense until you see it in context a little more. And you might gravitate back towards the big idea, but you need this little bit of detail one level down to really help bring it to life and to help it click and stick in your head.
And now, I would be remiss if I presented on this bucketing level without including a shout out to Craig Hightower, our colleague on the West Coast, who we love working with, who every time we're doing this exercise, he can always be counted upon to deliver the gospel of you should never have more than 3 buckets. And he believes really strongly that we should always have, 2 or 3, no more than 3, because how can a person remember more than 3? And I actually think that's a really good discipline. When you find yourself with like 6 buckets, 6 categories, it's hard to imagine a donor remembering all that stuff at once. Now, I'm not quite as true a believer as Craig. I will go 4 buckets. Maybe I'll go 5 for, an organization where the donors are really informed, really close to the organization. They're, it's not an arm's length kind of thing. We think we can hit them with a little more information. But, that discipline of what would this look like if we boiled it down to 3 big buckets? At least it's always a really good place to start.
And finally, there's the project level. Now, the project level is oftentimes what seems strongest to begin with. How many times is your organization start by developing plans? Maybe you go through a strategic planning process, and you really feel like what you're going to do is nailed down. This is oftentimes we're talking about compelling clarity. These seem to have the most clarity at the beginning. But I think that what's important to keep in mind is just because you have clear plans doesn't mean you have a clear story or a clear case. You need to add that story to each one of these in order to really help make them more compelling to donors, help them see what's so important and exciting about each project. And so we actually recommend for this that you essentially develop a mini case for each project. We mean that both conceptually when writing the overall narrative, but a lot of times we actually do that literally. We will develop standalone project cases for every major project. We'll have a brochure that conveys the vision and the full sweep of the narrative, but we'll then develop more detailed inserts or project cases for each of these that will have things like a headline talking about what's really the big picture, the impact, the key idea of this one project here. Why does it matter? Why should you care? What's the need it's helping to meet? Why your organization is the one that can help meet that need. Then we'll get into the plans and the impact and how the donor funding will be used. And to go way back to the beginning, we were talking about these being truly significant investments for donors, $25,000 investments, $100,000 investments, maybe if you're lucky even more than that. They need to see what their money is ultimately being used for. Donors care so much about that, especially now. And even if your vision is strong, you're going to want to be able to make a strong, compelling case, tell a clear narrative about each project you're asking them to support.
So that's kind of our quick rundown of the 3 levels, and we wanted to spend most of our time on those 3 levels because that's really where most of the thinking and work needs to happen in campaign case development. Making sure that, again, you're strong from top to bottom. So that's the heart of campaign case work. We wanted to take a few minutes to talk about branding and sort of the more of the packaging of your campaign case. This is a really interesting area that we do a lot of work in. We do a lot of campaign names, campaign branding, campaign messaging. I mean, this is an integral part of the work that we do, and it's really can be quite tricky in a way. I tend to think of the campaign branding as being the trickiest part in the whole process because you can have really good consensus around the projects, the strategies, the vision. Everyone's kind of on the same page about that. But then when you go to put a name on that campaign, all of a sudden you feel like, you're starting a whole new conversation. And because you're moving really clearly into the external facing expression of your campaign case. You're starting to think about it exclusively through kind of that external donor mindset. What are they going to see as the face of this campaign? And obviously that begins or is really substantially influenced by the campaign name. So some thoughts about campaign names. Basically, what are we looking for? What is a campaign name supposed to do? A few things. First of all, it's your first impression, and it needs to work before you explain it. We do a lot of campaign naming, and we can come up with and talk ourselves into, really overly clever names that have, too many kind of second level meanings, but not a strong enough first level meaning, or names that feel like they're, it's really ingenious once you explain it, but every time you present it, you're not going to be able to explain it. So it has to work just flat out first impression. It has to stimulate some kind of initial feeling or response before you explain it. And if it has then a bunch of other clever second level secondary meanings and all these different things you can do with it, that's great, but you can't have only that. It has to be really easy to use in conversation, which generally means it needs to be pretty short. You have to think about, how does it fit in a sentence? Hey, I'm here to, I'd like to talk to you about the blank campaign. Or, we'd like you to think about making a gift to the blank campaign or our new blank campaign. Does it work in a sentence like that? If the campaign, if it doesn't work, if it's like, hey, I'd really like to talk to you about, our organization, and we'd like you to consider being a part of our new Building the Next Century of Excellence and Excelling in the Tradition of Legacy. If it blows up your sentence, you're not going to use it in conversation. You're just going to say, let me talk to you about the new campaign. It's just going to start, it's going to drop out of the conversation. People aren't going to use it, and then no one's going to know it. And then when they see it on the letterhead, they're going to be like, oh, that's what this thing is called? So it has to have that easy-to-use factor, which tends to be a proxy for, keeping it short. Or if you have a name that has, 3 or 4 words, usually it's good to have if there's one word in there that can serve as kind of the truncated version. So if you do have, legacy of this or that, it's going to get truncated to, let's talk about the legacy campaign. So, that's just something to be thinking about. What you want a campaign name to do basically is to set the tone and to send a signal about the energy and the attitude and the voice, and it's really more about personality than content. It's about the attitude of the campaign. You're not going to be able to have a campaign name that kind of tells the story of the campaign. It's not going to be able to make your case for you, and you shouldn't try to. Sometimes we see campaign names that are really explanatory, that are almost like a complete sentence, or feel like they're trying to summarize the campaign, and that's tricky because it's really hard to do that. But a perfect campaign name can just be like 1 word or 2 words that just have the right feeling, the right overall sensibility to them. And the other thing you want to do is make sure that it connects to the campaign projects. It should set you up to talk about the projects. It should say, it should apply. You should be able to put it as almost like a stamp. Like you can stamp this name on, the 4 or 5 different campaign projects, and it feels like there's some meaning there. There's a connection between that first impression and what we follow through on with the projects. Again, it doesn't need to summarize them. It doesn't need to deliver the content of the projects, but just the meaning of the projects. So, campaign names, this is what we think they need to do, but there's, just from a process standpoint, a couple other thoughts I would throw out there. I think, again, short names are better. 2 to 3 words. If you can get a 1-word name, that everyone can agree on, then you are typically feeling good. Don't forget the campaign subtitle. You have your campaign name and then usually colon, the campaign for, or our campaign for science and innovation, or, such and such school's campaign for students and faculty. You know, you can do stuff in the secondary title, in the subtitle, that allows you to kind of introduce a little bit, you know, put in a few more ideas that maybe didn't make the cut in the top line of the name itself. So you don't always have to just say, you know, the campaign for X. You can do something with that subtitle, you know, our campaign for science and innovation, or, you know, the campaign for students, faculty, and staff. You know, you can start to convey a little bit of the content of the campaign there. And I actually like when we're able to do that, because it feels like you're conveying a sense of focus and substance right off the bat. The other thing is just process-wise with campaign names. I really strongly recommend that you think carefully about how you structure the process of campaign names. What we often see is organizations will say, okay, campaign committee, let's brainstorm names. We're going to take 15 minutes in our next steering committee meeting. We're all just going to throw some names out there and then see what we come up with, or we'll vote or something. And what this tends to lead to is a really long list of names that don't really have focus, and you start to sort of feel like you're sort of like drawing each other out to keep adding on to names. When we'll see names that come out of processes like that where it's like, you know, this is the 4 C's campaign for creativity, collaboration, community, and something else. You know, because somebody said, you know, let's make it all about community, and then someone else said, oh, well, let's make it about collaboration, and someone else said, well, let's make it all about creativity, and then someone says, well, let's roll it all together. Those all start with C. It's the 4 C's campaign. You know, that group process without a really strong hand driving it, and somewhat ruthlessly, can lead you down a lot of paths of sort of like compromised, you know, overly long names that just reflect like 5 ideas pushed into one, or like 2 names. You know, you'll have 2 names and you can't decide, so you smush them together and you get like what I call like a futon kind of campaign name, where it's like does 2 different things poorly. What I like to recommend is that you kind of control this process a little bit more. Have just 2 or 3 key people who are really good at this work on it. It might be your campaign chair. It might be, you know, this is stuff that we do, although you don't need to hire us to do this. You know, have 1 or 2 or 3 people really work on a short list of really good names. Let them do the brainstorming, and then come to your committee with 2 or 3 options, maybe 4. And they have to be options that are good enough that if they picked any one of them, you know, you'd be happy with it. We sometimes have this situation where we'll feel like, okay, well, we love this one name, but we're going to put in this other name as just so the committee feels like they have a choice, or they feel like they have an option. Let me tell you, that is a dangerous game because you do not know what they're gonna pick. So get down to 2 to 3 good options, and make sure they're options you could really happily live with. The other thing that comes along with names is thinking about. Oh, go ahead. Is there a question?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to interrupt your thought. We just have a relevant question to campaign names. So whenever you want the question, just let me know.
Yeah, we're on that topic now. So let's love to hear a question.
Okay, sure. So I think this is a challenging question. We are halfway through a capital campaign for the renovation of our professional theater, and the campaign seems to have lost steam. How do I rejuvenate the volunteers? And here's the campaign name: Today, Tomorrow, Forever.
Okay. You know, that's sometimes we get brought in as consultants to sort of to figure out that exact question. Why has a campaign lost steam? And obviously, there are many reasons that could happen. From, you know, so your volunteers are exhausted, or things have dragged on, or, you know, the pace of solicitations has been too slow, or you had a couple big asks of people that turned you down. I mean, there's a million reasons stuff can lose steam. We worked on a bunch of campaigns that started in exactly the wrong time in 2008, and then, you know, kind of ran out of steam and needed to be rejuvenated. So this is a whole webinar unto itself. But from a communication standpoint, we do see campaigns where there's a need to refresh the messaging and the case in the middle of a campaign. I would offer a couple thoughts on that. First, I wouldn't rush to change the name. Sometimes it feels like, well, it's easy to fixate on the name. Feel like, well, this name isn't right, so let's change the name, go back out under a new packaging, and then we'll have new momentum. You may be able to find a name that suits you better. I certainly have no basis to weigh in on that name without any knowledge, without really looking at the case itself. But it's what I would probably suspect first is that there may be value in really focusing on the messaging and the compelling clarity of ideas at every level of the case. Do we have a really strong story about the, can we tell someone, here are the top 5 great benefits of this new theater facility. Here's the 60-second story for the high-level vision of why our community needs this new theater facility. Here's the 3 big things this theater is going to try to accomplish strategically. It's going to enhance our artistic work. It's going to enable us to get out there in the community with more education and outreach, and it's going to build us a stronger, sustainable financial future because it's going to, be more. I'm making this up. I'm thinking about what might be really clear ideas at the big picture level, the project level, and the sort of the strategic level. So I would think first about making sure that we feel it's really strong at those levels, and then maybe if the branding or the name or those kinds of things come into question through that conversation, then you have some basis to think about those fresh. But yeah, I think we always try to go to the substance first before we think about the packaging. And related to that, along with the name comes thinking about the visual identity and, the logo and the visual brand. Just a few thoughts on this. I want to keep this real brief. You want to think about how close should it be to your institutional brand. Sometimes it's useful for it to be really close. Sometimes it's useful for it to be more different and to feel like it's something really fresh and new. You want to be thinking about how it relates across a range of materials and what does it look like with photography, because photography is your primary visual tool.
And now finally we wanted just to end really briefly with everyone's favorite topic, which I'm sure you've all been waiting for, process. And we'll be brief here, but I think, when you're thinking about how you go about developing this case, Andy hinted at it earlier, it can take a few different twists and turns. You want to make sure it's something that will work for your organization, your volunteers. And we just wanted to share a few key guidelines that we found to be really effective and really help you get to a good place. First, you need a task force. We think you want to get a group of people representing a few different viewpoints to weigh in to make sure it can speak to the full range of your stakeholders. But we recommend doing that with a task force rather than a board, just because if it's too many people, it's going to get a little bit unwieldy and it's going to be hard to get consensus and make decisions. We also think that you really need an author. There's nothing worse than materials or a message written by committee. We've all seen them. We've all shuddered as a result of reading them. You don't want a Frankenstein document. You want something that feels cohesive, that speaks with a unified voice, and that feels really human. We think, again, you want to think of your board. Since you're getting this task force together, treat your board more like an audience. They are your donors after all, not only volunteers. They're some of your most important donors. And we usually think you don't want to bring, kind of in progress or messy drafts to your board. You want to bring them something that's relatively polished and that's going to really help start to inspire them, help start to really instill these messages and a sense of energy among them. And finally, we wanted you to think about what's the right vehicle. Don't just resort to a 12 to 15-page written case. What's really going to help you develop your message, your vision, your case at each of these levels? Sometimes it might be a PowerPoint so you can really get the narrative together and a set of 12 to 15 key messages. Maybe it might help you just to limit yourself to a page and write a narrative that tells the story about the need, impetus, rationale, and ultimate impact. Sometimes you can do it through talking points or FAQ or a 4-page brief. Really just don't feel limited by the traditional case statement. Think about what's going to help you express your campaign vision in the most effective way.
All right. So we are at 12:59 Central Time, leaving us 1 o'clock. 0 seconds for questions, but we want to, Sarah, if we have maybe just 1 or 2 questions, I'd love
we
to
do.
hear a couple.
Can you take it real quick? I know everybody
Sure, yeah.
has, unfortunately, I know you have another obligation, but if we don't get to your question, we will certainly get to it over email. But here's one. When communicating the campaign plans, how do you account for changes that occur throughout the course of the campaign, especially in long campaigns?
Yeah, I'm so glad that the question was raised. And it's almost always the case that when you're going out the gate with a campaign, there's some level of sort of moving targetness around the projects. Oftentimes, details about projects will still be being worked out. Sometimes you're waiting for a commitment of matching funds from a public funding entity. Sometimes it's just like the architectural planning process that is not going to deliver any clear plans for another 6 or 12 months. So there are lots of ways in which stuff can be a moving target when you really need to be out there telling your story. For one reason, that's one of the reasons we tend not to go to print with final brochure materials right away. We tend to do that a little bit later because you don't want to do a print run of 1,000 of something that's immediately out of date. The other thought about that is just it's really it's okay if some of that stuff is still a moving target if the vision. It's why it's good to have a good, strong, high upper level vision and really strong strategy level, because then you can say to your donors, look, some of the details of these projects are still a moving target, but we know that it's working toward this vision, and we know it's critical to this strategy. And then you can say, especially with high-level donors who are, more insiders, you could say, here's what we know. We know it's going to be sort of within these parameters. It's probably going to be within 10 to 15,000 square feet, this new facility. It's probably going to cost between, $5 to $8 million. We're still working on it. You can present plans as they are. But what's really dangerous is when that level is fuzzy and the vision is fuzzy and there's not a clear, then it starts to feel like maybe this thing isn't quite ready for prime time. So that's what I would say about that.
And I would just add really briefly, earlier when we were talking about developing your case at the project level, we were talking about making the case for each project, telling a narrative that's going to support each project. And I think as the particulars of the plans are in flux, that narrative will often still help you make the case and convey where you're going with it. If you know what the ultimate impact you're moving towards is, or what the need for this new theater is, even if the square footage or the particular layout is going to change, that can help you still start to get people on board with it, even as it's developing.
Thanks, Pat. Maybe one more question, Sarah?
Sure, one more. Can you talk about an example that does not include serving more, but rather serving better in a community?
Oh yeah, we do. That's at least as frequent as sort of scaling up campaigns. I mean, obviously there are a lot of campaigns that are about sort of bigger and better. But sometimes we actually just did a project with a college within a larger university. This was just for the college, and they actually were planning on growing their enrollment, but they didn't really want to talk about that aspect of it because they felt like that wasn't actually what was most important about it. And every time we tried to sort of highlight, and this was me, I was always saying, come on, let's just talk about, X% more students. This is great. It's so tangible. They would push back and say, we don't want it to feel, people to feel like we're, compromising the sort of intimate, nature of our low, student-faculty ratio and the individualized attention. We don't want to draw too much attention to the increased enrollment. We want to talk about how this project enables us to do better what we're already doing. A lot of school campaigns are that way, and I find in those campaigns we're often grounding the case in an expression of who we are. We're saying, this campaign, it's not about changing the formula or changing the recipe. It's not about taking over the world and serving twice as many students. It's about taking the things that you know and love about this school and doubling down on them so that we can commit to them for the next generation or so. A lot of these campaigns have a who we are kind of feeling to them. It's about and reflecting back and speaking to people's love of the school or the institution or whatever it is, you know, the things that make us great, we are investing in those things. So I've used that as kind of an organizing principle for campaigns like that.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we're at our time, but I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and especially to those, we should have some sort of like badge of honor for anyone, if there's anyone out there who did all 4 webinars this year. Thank you, and congratulations. Yeah, we'll see you next year with the next refreshed and updated version of fundraising communications, and we look forward to seeing all the good work that everyone will do.
Thanks, guys.